Picture the coldest night of your life. Now take away your shoes, take away your coat, take away breakfast, and yesterday's breakfast, and the breakfast before that. Add 12,000 men, 2,000 horses, a river full of ice, and an army that is starving 18 miles from the best-fed city in America. That's Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, in the winter of 1778, the birthplace of the American Army, and very nearly its grave. A place where a man could freeze to death standing guard in the morning and hear violin music drifting on the wind by evening, because the enemy, warm and fat in Philadelphia, was throwing another ball. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists reading the bronze plaques, we're living it. One winter, one soldier. Everything he would have seen, smelled, heard, and survived. If he survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who like hearing about men boiling their own shoes for soup. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. You have blankets. That already puts you ahead of most of the Continental Army. Here we go. The first thing you understand about Valley Forge is that you cannot feel your feet, and the sergeant is telling you that you have 4 more hours of guard duty. And both of these things are true at the same time, and neither of them cares about the other. It is the 2nd week of January, 1778. You're standing on the outer picket line on the western slope above Valley Creek, and you've been standing there since midnight, and the wind coming off the Schuylkill River has teeth. Not a metaphor, it has teeth. It finds the split seam under your left arm, the one you've been meaning to sew, and it bites there, and then it moves down to your feet, and there it doesn't need to find anything, because your feet are wrapped in strips of blanket and raw cowhide, and your actual shoes fell apart somewhere on the march from White Marsh a month ago, and the cowhide froze stiff 2 hours into your watch, and now it doesn't feel like your feet are cold anymore. It feels like you're standing on 2 blocks of wood that belong to someone else. That's the dangerous part. The cold you can feel is survivable. The cold you can't feel is already killing you. Your name is Asa Merrill. You're 19 years old. You're a private in the 4th Connecticut Regiment of the Continental Line, and 14 months ago you were a farmer's second son in Litchfield, Connecticut, with strong hands, a good dog, and no idea what the inside of a war looked like. You enlisted for 3 years. You have 2 left. Standing here, with the wind pulling water out of your eyes and freezing it on your cheekbones, 2 years feels like a sentence handed down by a judge. Somewhere behind you, spread across 2,000 acres of frozen Pennsylvania hillside, 12,000 men are trying to sleep in huts they built with their own hands, out of green logs and mud. Somewhere in front of you, 18 miles down the road to the southeast, is Philadelphia, the largest city in America, occupied since September by General William Howe and 15,000 British and Hessian troops. They have the city's houses, they have its firewood, they have its flour, its beef, its rum, its theatres, its ballrooms, and its beds. You have this hill. And here's the thing they don't tell you when you enlist, the thing no recruiting sergeant in Litchfield ever mentioned over his drum and his ribbons. The enemy is not the main problem. The British haven't attacked in weeks. They're not going to attack tonight. Why would they? They're warm. No, the things trying to kill you tonight are your own side's problems. The commissary that has no meat, the quartermaster that has no shoes, the Congress sitting safe in York that has no money, hunger, cold, and paperwork. Those are the 3 armies laying siege to Valley Forge, and they never sleep, and they never miss. You shift your weight, and the frozen hide crackles under your right foot like a dry branch, and pain shoots up through the numbness, bright and sudden, all the way to your knee. Good. Pain means the foot is still yours. You have learned to be grateful for very strange things this winter. Out in the dark, down toward the creek, something moves. You go still. Your musket comes up. Your thumb finds the frizzen, and your heart, which was beating slow and thick like cold syrup, kicks twice, hard. Movement again, low, heavy. Coming up through the brush along the frozen creek bed. The standing orders are clear. Anything approaching the picket line at night gets challenged once. Anything that doesn't answer gets shot. 2 weeks ago, a sentry on the Gulf Road post fired at a shadow, and the whole line stood to arms for an hour in the freezing dark, and it turned out to be nothing. And the sentry got laughed at for 3 days. But 3 weeks before that, a forage party out past the Gulf got cut up by British light dragoons who came in fast and quiet, and 2 men from the Pennsylvania line never came back, so nobody laughs very hard. "Who goes there?" you call. Your voice comes out cracked, half frozen in your throat. The shape stops, then it snorts. It's a horse, a loose horse, ribs like barrel staves dragging a broken halter rope, picking its way along the creek looking for anything green under the snow. It stares at you with one wet black eye that catches the starlight, and you stare back, and you lower the musket, and for a moment the 2 of you just stand there in the dark, 2 starving animals on a hillside in Pennsylvania, breathing white. The army's horses are dying faster than the men, hundreds of them already, dead of starvation and cold, dragged into pits or left where they fell because the ground is too frozen to bury them deep. That smell, the sweet rot underneath the wood smoke, the one that hits you when the wind turns easterly, that's them. When the horses die, the men pull the wagons themselves. You've done it. You've put your chest against a rope and hauled firewood like an ox, 8 men to a sledge, because every horse in your brigade's train was either dead or too weak to stand. The horse loses interest in you and moves off into the dark, and you are alone again with the wind. 4 more hours. You do what you always do. You build the farm in your head. You start at the gate, the one with the leather hinge your father never fixed, and you walk up the lane, and it's September there, always September, and the air smells like cut hay and apples starting to turn sweet on the ground, and your mother is in the doorway and there is bread. You've gotten very specific about the bread, the crack of the crust, the steam coming off the torn edge, the butter going to liquid gold in the heat of it. Your stomach makes a sound like a door opening on a rusted hinge, long and low, and you stop building the farm because the bread was a mistake. The bread is always a mistake. You have eaten 1 meal in the last day and a half, and that meal was fire cake, and calling fire cake a meal is a lie the army tells itself. Here is the recipe for fire cake, the dish that is keeping the Continental Army alive this winter. Take flour. That's it. That's the whole list of ingredients, and half the time you don't even have that. Mix the flour with water into a grey paste. Slap the paste onto a flat stone, shove the stone into the coals and wait until the outside chars black and the inside sets into something with the texture of wet clay and the flavour of nothing at all. No salt. Salt ran out. No meat. There has been no meat in your part of camp for 6 days. When the commissary wagons do come in, half of what they carry is spoiled. Barrels of beef gone green and soft because there was no salt to pack it in. Flour soaked through and moulded because the wagons sat broken on a road somewhere for 2 weeks while teamsters argued about pay. Fire cake and water for breakfast. Fire cake and water for dinner. The men have started chanting it at the commissary officers when they walk through camp. Dozens of voices out of the hut doorways, flat and toneless. No meat, no meat, no meat. And the sound of it moves across the hillside like crows calling. And the officers keep their eyes forward and keep walking, because what is there to say? And 18 miles away, tonight, right now, a British officer in Philadelphia is deciding between the roast goose and the oyster pie. You know this. Everyone in camp knows this. Deserters go over to the British lines at the rate of a handful every week. Men who just can't do it anymore. And word comes back through the farmers and the smugglers about what the city is like. The theatres are open. Howe's officers have started a playhouse on South Street. There are balls twice a week. The Schuylkill ferries carry Philadelphia merchants' beef and butter into the city, sold for hard British gold, while your Congress pays for supplies in Continental paper money that the same farmers use to light their pipes. It is not that the food doesn't exist. That's the part that gets inside you and stays. Pennsylvania is the richest farm country on the continent. The barns within 40 miles of where you're standing hold enough grain and pork to feed this army twice over. The food exists. It is simply going, wagon by wagon, to the enemy, because the enemy pays in silver and your side pays in promises. You are starving inside a full pantry. That is the painful truth about Valley Forge, and you learned it in your first week here, and you will never fully unlearn it for the rest of your life. The sky over Mount Joy goes from black to charcoal to a dirty grey, and somewhere down the line a drum starts, hollow and dull in the cold air, and your relief comes trudging up the hill at last. A Rhode Island man with a blanket worn like a hooded cloak over his head and shoulders, and he takes the post without a word, and you make your legs move. Walking is a science now. Your feet are wooden stumps and the ground is rutted ice. Frozen mud churned by 10,000 feet, and then set hard as iron, and every step is a small negotiation. You come down off the picket line and into the camp proper as the light comes up, and even now, 6 weeks in, the sight of it stops something in your chest. It's a city. That's what nobody expects. Valley Forge is not a camp. It's a city built in a month by starving men, laid out in streets, more than 1,000 log huts in ranked rows across the hillsides, brigade by brigade, regiment by regiment, smoke rising from 1,000 mud and stick chimneys into the grey morning. And behind the huts, the earthworks, the trenches and redoubts crawling along the high ground, and beyond everything the outer line of defences stretching 2 miles from the Schuylkill around to Valley Creek. Third largest city in America this winter, someone told you. Only Philadelphia and New York are bigger, and both of those belong to the king. Your hut is in the third row of the Connecticut Brigade Street, and it looks exactly like every other hut because General Washington's orders specified exactly what it should look like. 14 feet by 16 feet, 6.5 feet high at the walls, logs chinked with clay, a fireplace at one end, a door of split slabs at the other, and a roof of whatever could be found, which in your case is split oak shakes that leak meltwater in a thaw, and let the wind sing through in a freeze. 12 men live in this room. 12 men in a space smaller than your mother's kitchen. Washington offered a prize back in December when the army first marched in, and there was nothing on these hills but trees and snow. $12 to the squad in each regiment that finished its hut first and best. Your squad didn't win. The Rhode Islanders next door won, because they had 2 ship's carpenters from Providence who could notch a log joint in the dark. But you built this thing. You personally, your hands were part of it. felling green oak with dull axes in the snow, hauling the logs on your shoulders because the horses were already dying, packing clay into the gaps with fingers split open at every knuckle. It took your squad 9 days. The first 3 nights of those 9 days you slept in a tent in a snowstorm. You push open the slab door and the smell folds around you like a blanket. And here is the honest truth. It's a terrible smell and you love it. It's smoke first. Always smoke. Green oak smoke that never fully leaves the hut or your clothes or your hair. Under the smoke, wet wool. 12 men's worth of wool that had been rained on, snowed on, sweated in, and never once washed. Under the wool, bodies, feet specifically, and under everything, faint but permanent, the clay and earth smell of the floor and the walls, like living inside a root cellar, which, in every way that matters, you are. Smells like warmth. It smells like not being on the picket line. You'd bottle it if you could. Shut the door, you're letting the smoke out, says Jonah Pratt, which is his joke. Because the smoke never goes out. The chimney draws badly, and the hut lives in a permanent grey haze at head height, and everyone's eyes run all winter, and everyone makes the same joke, and everyone still laughs, a little, because it's 400 miles to anything funnier. Jonah is 16. He told the recruiter he was 18, and the recruiter wrote it down without looking up. He's from Norwich, a rope maker's son, and he has the bunk above yours, which means you know the sound of his breathing better than you know your own. And lately you have been listening to it, because lately, this last week, there's been a rattle in it, down at the bottom of each breath, like a pebble in a jar. You don't say anything about the rattle. There's nothing to say. Half the hut has a cough. The hospital huts down by the creek are full, and the word from the men who carry the sick down there is that you go in with a fever and you come out feet first, and the doctors have nothing. No bark, no wine, no clean straw even, and the sick lie 2 to a bunk breathing on each other. Camp fever, the doctors call it, when they bother to call it anything. Putrid fever. The itch, the flux, the pox. This army will lose 10 men to disease this winter for everyone lost to the British, and you don't know that number yet, standing in the doorway of your hut in January, but you know the shape of it. Everyone knows the shape of it. It's the shape of the burial detail going out past the artillery park in the grey afternoons, and the shape of the ground there, which is starting to look ploughed. Anything, you ask, meaning food, because that's what the word means now. Cyrus is on the kettle, Jonah says. We got flour, whole half barrel come up to the regiment last night, and Ben traded for something you're not going to believe. At the fire, Cyrus Wheeler, 40 years old, oldest man in the hut, a cooper from Hertford with forearms like stacked cordwood even now, even starving, is crouched over the flat stones working paste with his fingers, and beside him Ben Ostrander is holding up his prize with both hands like a parson raising the communion cup. It's a turnip. One turnip the size of a child's fist gone slightly soft, with a black spot on one shoulder. Cost me a good flint and my other shirt, Ben says. You don't have another shirt. I do not, Ben agrees, peaceful as a Sunday. Not any more. And he pulls out his knife and begins to slice the turnip thin as paper. 12 slices and then 12 more, so that every man in the hut will get something, and Cyrus takes the slices and presses them into the fire cakes. And for a moment watching this, watching a grown man divide one soft turnip 12 ways with the care of a jeweller, your throat closes up, and you have to look at the fire and blink. This is the thing you could never explain in a letter home, and God knows you've tried, sitting with the regiment's stub of pencil and the back of an old return sheet. The misery is one thing, Your mother can imagine cold more or less. What she can't imagine is this, that packed into the misery, all through it, like the turnip in the fire cake, is something you have no good word for. 12 men who owe each other everything. Ben's shirt, Cyrus's hands, the way the man coming off guard gets the spot nearest the fire without anyone saying so, the way it's just law, hut law, older than Congress. You came to this war for liberty, which was a word in a pamphlet. You'll stay in it for these 11 men, which is not a word at all. It's a smell of smoke and wet wool. It's a slice of turnip you didn't ask for. You eat your fire cake sitting on the frozen clay floor with your back against the bunk post. It burns your fingers and then goes cold before you finish it, both somehow within the same minute. The turnip slice is in the middle. You save it for last. It tastes like water and earth and the faintest ghost of sweetness, and it is, without competition, the finest thing you have eaten in the year of our Lord 1778. Then Sergeant Enoch Hale puts his head in the door, and the day begins in earnest. And at Valley Forge this January, the day means one thing before all others: wood. An army of 12,000 men in the dead of winter burns wood the way a fire burns wood, which is to say, constantly, enormously, and without gratitude. Every hut needs fuel every hour of every day. The hospital huts need it worse. The bake ovens, when there's flour, need it. The forges, the guard fires, the officers' quarters, all of it, day and night. And the hills of Valley Forge were forested when the army arrived in December, and they are not forested now. Every tree within a mile of camp went in the first month. Hardwood first, then everything. Now the wood details walk 2 miles, 3, out past the picket lines with axes and drag ropes, and the work of feeding the fires has become the great labour of the army, bigger than drill, bigger than the war, and you do it barefoot. Not you personally, not today. Today you have your cowhide wrappings, but the man beside you on the drag rope, a Massachusetts boy loaned to the detail, is barefoot on the ice. Actually barefoot, his feet wrapped in nothing, purple-grey and cracked, and leaving, every 5th or 6th step, a small red print in the snow. This is not rare. This is the thing the returns say, in the neat handwriting sent up to headquarters every week. Near 3,000 men in this camp unfit for duty for want of shoes and clothing. 1/3 of the army, more, cannot stand a post or walk a road because they are, in the middle of winter, in the middle of a war, effectively naked. Men wrapped in blankets like ghosts because their coats went to rags. Men who cannot leave their bunks because they have no breeches, none, and their share of the hut's clothing is being worn by the man whose turn it is to go outside. There are huts in this camp where 12 men own 4 hats among them. Washington wrote it to Congress in December, the sentence going down the road to York in his own hand. You might have tracked the army from White Marsh to Valley Forge by the blood of their feet. The Massachusetts boy sees you looking and looks away, jaw set, and pulls harder on the rope, and you understand, because you've learned this too. There is a hierarchy of shame in this camp that has nothing to do with rank. Being hungry is nothing. Everyone's hungry. Being lousy is nothing. The lice hold general muster on every man in camp. But being barefoot, leaving your own blood in the snow while you work, and having a stranger's eyes go to your feet, that lands somewhere. So you learn the camp courtesy. You don't look at feet. You look at the load, or the sky, or the rope in your own raw hands, hemp fibre stiff with ice, the weight of a green oak trunk coming through it in a long shuddering drag, your shoulders burning, your breath coming in ragged white bursts, and you count steps, and you do not look at anyone's feet. By early afternoon you have made 3 trips and your hands will not fully open. The palms have gone past blister into something harder, cracked yellow ridges that split at the creases and weep and refreeze, and when you flex your fingers the skin opens along the old splits with a small bright pain, like tiny mouths, and you rub tallow into them when there's tallow and there is not, this week, tallow. You are stacking the last load along the hut wall when the sound comes up the brigade street. Hoofbeats, several horses, moving at a walk, and then the voices change, hut by hut, and men come out into the cold, bareheaded some of them, and stand and you turn and it's him. You've seen him before. Everyone has. He rides through the camp most days, along the hut streets, out to the works, down to the hospitals. A big man on a big horse, grey-blue cloak, and the thing you notice, the thing everyone notices and nobody has language for, is that he looks at you. Not over you, at the ground you stand on the way a man inspects a fence line. At you. He is coming up the Connecticut street at a walk with 2 aides behind him, and his eyes are going hut to hut, man, to the wood stacks, to the chimneys, to the boy from Massachusetts whose feet he sees. You watch him see them, you watch it register, a small settling around the mouth, and then His Excellency General George Washington looks at you, at your face, for maybe half of 1 second, and nods, the way one working man nods at another over a job of work and rides on. That's all, half a second. He is 45 years old. He commands the entire Continental Army. He is living in a small stone house at the confluence of the creek and the river that he rents from a Quaker widow's family. And he has spent this entire day, you will learn later, the way he spends every day. Write in letters that are all the same letter. Send food, send clothing, send money, or this army will starve, dissolve, or disperse. Those are his own 3 words from the last week of December on paper going to Congress. Starve, dissolve, or disperse. He wrote that, and then he stayed. That's the part that holds the camp together, and every man on this hillside understands it in his body if not in his words. The general's wife is coming from Virginia to spend the winter in the little stone house. The general could be at his own fireside at Mount Vernon. He's here, riding a frozen hut street in the wind, looking at your face. Half a second. You will tell your grandchildren about it. You don't know that yet either. Close your mouth, Merrill, says Sergeant Hale behind you, not unkindly. You'll freeze your tongue. The light starts to go around 5, and with the dark the cold comes back down off the ridge like something with a body, and the camp folds in on itself. 12,000 men squeezing toward 1,000 fires, and this is the hour, every day, when the other thing happens. The counting hour. Officers with lantern light and company books hut to hut. Present and fit. Present, sick, sick in hospital, on command, deserted. That last column grows every week. Nobody in your hut has gone over, not yet, but the Pennsylvania regiments, whose men can walk home in 2 days, and the newer levies, men with no 3-year bond and no hut law holding them, are bleeding out into the countryside. Some go to the British for the bounty and the beef. More just go home. You've heard men argue it at the fires, low voices. Is it desertion if the army broke the contract first, if the pay is 8 months behind and the food is a lie? And you've heard Cyrus Wheeler end one of those arguments without raising his voice. The Congress owes me money. The men in this hut, I owe them me, different ledgers. And he spat in the fire, and that was that. Full dark. Jonah's cough, above you, has moved from the bottom of his breath to the top of it. You lie in the bunk in every piece of clothing you own, under a blanket gone thin as cheesecloth, packed against the body heat of the man beside you. and the wind works, the roof shakes, lifting one somewhere over the door, letting it fall, tick, tick, all night, and the fire burns down to a red eye, and around you 11 men breathe and rattle and murmur, and somewhere out on the line a sentry who is you, yesterday, and will be you again, tomorrow, is standing on wooden feet in the dark, keeping the whole starving city safe. And 18 miles away the candles in Philadelphia are lit, hundreds of them, thousands, blazing in the tall windows on 2nd Street. And somewhere under those candles a fiddler is tuning, and an officer of the crown is bowing over a Philadelphia lady's hand. And the tables in the supper room are laid with goose and ham and syllabub and Madeira. And none of them, not one man in that warm and glittering room, believes the army on the hill at Valley Forge will still exist in the spring. Hold that thought. Hold it the way you hold it, lying in the smoke-dark hut with your cracked hands pressed between your knees, because they're wrong. And the story of this winter is the story of exactly how they turn out to be wrong. And it begins, of all things, with a fat Prussian who can't speak English, and it begins soon. But first you have to get through February, and February is when the army almost dies. Before February comes for the army, spend one more ordinary night in the hut, because the ordinary nights are the winter, really. Far more than the alarms and the marches, and no one ever puts them in the histories, and they are where the army actually lived. It is late January after evening count, the door barred with its slab, the fire built up for the night with the green oak hissing and spitting its sap like a cat, and the hut is doing what the hut does every night, which is everything at once in a space smaller than a kitchen. 2 men are asleep already, dead to the world, one of them snoring in long tearing strokes. 3 are at cards by the firelight, playing for pine splinters because nobody has been paid since the leaves were on the trees, and arguing the score with a passion that money could not improve. Ben is trading. Ben is always trading, this time a bone button against a needle and thread loan, negotiations conducted in a murmur with the gravity of Admiralty law, and you're doing what every soldier at Valley Forge does at least 1 hour of every day, whether or not it appears on any duty roster. You are killing lice. There is no delicate way to tell this part, and it would be a lie of a story that left it out, because the louse is as much a member of the Continental Army as you are, present at every muster, faithful unto death. Every man in this camp is lousy. Every man. The general officers are lousy. The seams of your shirt, the warm seams under the arms, along the waist, are where they hold their assemblies. And so the evening ritual, all across the 2,000-acre city, is 10,000 men sitting shirtless as close to their fires as they can bear, running the seams of their clothing slowly over their thumbnails, or, better, along a heated stone, and the sound of it, the tiny crack, 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 like the world's smallest musketry, is so universal that the men call it the Valley Forge Review, reading the seams, and a man skilled at it works with the absent placid face of a woman shelling peas. You hate it less than you did. That frightened you when you noticed it back in December, the way the disgust wore down, and Cyrus saw it in your face one evening and read it exactly. Because Cyrus reads men the way he reads barrel staves, and said, not looking up from his own seam, "It isn't you getting dirtier, lad. It's you getting harder to disgust. Different thing. One's a loss. The other's armour. You'll want the armour before this is done." Crack, crack. And you have thought about that distinction on many nights since, and you are still not certain he was right, that it is a different thing. but you wear the armour because he was certainly right that you would want it. The other great evening industry is mending, and mending at Valley Forge is not a chore, it is a survival trade practiced at the level of art, because cloth cannot be replaced, only defended, and every man has become his own tailor with whatever came to hand. Thread is unravelled from the hems of ruined garments and rewound. Patches are cut from the coats of men who died, which is not ghoulish, which is the plainest sense in the world, and every man in the hut is wearing some part of a man who is gone, and knows it, and it is never spoken of and never forgotten. A quiet company of the absent stitched into the company of the living. Tonight you are relining the inside of your left cowhide foot wrapping with a piece of felted hat brim, working the awl Ben rented you, the fire hot on your right side, and the wool's cold breath on your left, which is the hut's climate everywhere, roast and freeze, turn like a spit, and your needle hand cracks and bleeds a little at the second knuckle, and you wipe it and keep on, because tomorrow that felt is 4 hours on the picket line, and this stitching, right now, is exactly as much soldiering as anything you will ever do with a musket. And then, because the cards have gone quiet and the fire has settled to the deep orange hour when huts talk, somebody asks Cyrus about the last war. They ask most weeks. He answers about 1 week in 3 on his own clock, and tonight the clock strikes. Cyrus Wheeler was at the siege of Havana in '62, a boy younger than you are now, a provincial soldier in the king's service, in the war before this one, when the enemy was France and Spain, and the king's coat was the coat he was proud of, and he tells it staring into the fire in the flat voice he'd used to price a barrel. He tells about the heat, which he says no man here can imagine, and he hopes no man here ever learns, and the trenches dug in coral rock that broke the picks, and then he tells about the fever, the yellow jack, how the army took the great fortress with bravery and mining and lost 100 men doing it, and then stayed in the captured city and lost 5,000 to the fever without the enemy firing a shot. 5,000, an army melted like tallow in the sun, comrades yellow-eyed in the morning and dead by the next evening, buried in sand too shallow because the living were too sick to dig, and how he took ship home one of the few whole men of his company, and how the king's government, in the peace, traded Havana back to Spain for Florida, which he pronounces the way other men pronounce curses. The hut is very quiet. The green oak spits. So when they tell you, Cyrus says, that this here is the worst winter an army ever kept, you may believe them or not, that's your affair. I've seen worse kept for less, what I have not seen, and here he looks up from the fire once around the hut, at the card players and the menders and the mounded sleepers, 12 men minus none, that January still minus none. What I have not seen, before this hill, is an army keep a winter like this one for a thing it chose itself. Havana we kept for the king's shilling. This we keep on no shilling at all. He works his seam. Crack. First army I ever served in that was anybody's. That was anybody's. He says it and goes back to his lice, and declines, in the Cyrus way, to say another word all evening, and the hut takes the sentence and turns it over privately, each man at his own fire-staring pace, and you lie in your bunk later with the words going round. Because he has put his thumb on the thing under the whole winter that you have felt and never framed. You have no shoes because the army's anybody's. You are unpaid because the army's anybody's. Because there is no king behind it with a treasury and a lash for the contractors, only a congress of arguing lawyers and 13 jealous states, and a currency made of hope. Everything that is starving you is the same fact as everything you are fighting for. The misery and the meaning have one root, A king's army would never have been left barefoot on this hill, and a king's army would never have stayed. Outside, late, the wind gets up and the loose shake over the door begins its tick-tick, and above you Jonah shifts and coughs. Twice. The small dry cough that in a week you will know was the beginning, and murmurs something about splices in his sleep, rope-maker's dreams, and the fire falls in on itself with a soft collapse and a spray of sparks, and the man whose watch it is unrolls from his blanket without being told, and feeds it 2 splits and rolls back, and the hut breathes 12 breaths in the smoky dark, out of rhythm and somehow one sound, and beyond the clay-chinked wall at your shoulder, the sentries are calling the hour down the line. All's well. Faint. Farther. Fainter. All's well. Passing the whole starving city hand to hand through the dark like a bucket at a fire. It was not well. You know that, lying there, better than any man in Congress knows it. And it was also, at the same time, in the way that mattered longest, more well than any camp you would ever sleep in again. Both things. You stopped trying to pick them apart somewhere around the middle of that January, and you never took it up again, and neither will this story. The thaw comes in the second week of February like a trick. 2 days of soft southern wind, the ice on the creek groaning and cracking, water dripping off every roof in camp, and men stand out in the hut streets with their faces turned up to it like plants. And then you understand what the thaw actually means, because the roads, the frozen, ruined roads that were at least hard, dissolve. They become rivers of mud, axle deep, hub deep, and the supply wagons that were trickling into camp stop entirely. Not slow down, stop. And the commissary, which was a starving man's cupboard, becomes an empty one. You will remember the middle of February 1778 in your body for the rest of your life, the way other men remember battles. For 6 days your regiment receives in total a half ration of flour once. That is the complete list. On the worst stretch, 3 days pass in which no food of any kind is issued to your brigade. None. Thousands of men, 3 days, 0 food. The horses die in ranks now, 30, 40 in a night. Men boil the bark of trees. Men boil their shoe leather. Actually boil it. Actually drink the water. And you know, because you're one of them, crouched at the fire with Cyrus, watching a strip of ruined cowhide turn grey in the kettle, and the broth tastes like burned hair and glue, and you drink every drop, and your stomach, ravenous and betrayed, cramps around it for an hour. Hunger, real hunger, the 3rd day kind, is not what you thought. It's not a feeling in your belly, it's a whole body event. Your hands shake. Your vision sparkles at the edges when you stand. Sounds arrive from very far away. You become stupid, genuinely stupid. You stand holding an axe and cannot remember the next thing about wood. And the cruelest part, the part nobody warns you about, your nose becomes a genius. You can smell an officer's ration of bacon frying from 300 yards, upwind, through smoke. Your body, dying of want, turns its last strength to tormenting you with information. On the 3rd night with no ration, it starts down at the far end of the brigade street. A voice, then 10, then 100 out of the dark hut doors, flat, rhythmic, toneless. No meat, no meat, no meat, and then a new sound underneath it, a cawing. Men cawing like crows, like carrion birds, an army of scarecrows crying out the only bird call that fits, and it spreads street to street across the whole hillside in the dark. Thousands of voices, no meat, and the sound goes up into the freezing sky over Mount Joy, and you are doing it too, you notice. Your own throat is doing it, and it isn't mutiny quite. That's the razor's edge everyone can feel. It's the sound an army makes 1 inch before mutiny, the sound of the inch itself. The officers hear it. Washington hears it in the little stone house. This time we know what he wrote that very week, because the letter survives. Unless something is done, this army must inevitably starve, dissolve, or disperse. And this time something is done, because there is nothing left to try but the thing he hates. He sends the army out to take the food, which is how, on a raw grey morning at the end of that starving week, you find yourself marching out of camp with a foraging column, a musket, 1 cartridge box, and orders that no one reads aloud twice. Sweep the country, find the grain, find the cattle, pay in certificates, and bring it in. And what a certificate is, everyone knows. A scrap of paper with an officer's signature, a promise from a Congress with no money, pressed into the hand of a Pennsylvania farmer whose barn you are emptying whether he sells or not. There's a word for this when other armies do it. You grew up on the word plunder. The thing British soldiers do, the thing the pamphlets and the sermons put at the centre of the whole quarrel, the king's men taking what is yours without your consent, and now you're standing in a Quaker farmer's barnyard near the Gulf with frost on your musket, and the farmer is standing in front of his barn door in his plain coat, not moving, not shouting, just looking at your lieutenant with a face like a closed ledger, saying, "Thee may take it, I will not sell it, and I will not stop thee, but thee should know what thee is." And the lieutenant, who is 22 and from New Haven, and looks like he hasn't slept since Christmas, says quietly, "I know what I am, sir, I'm hungry," and nods at the sergeant, and the barn door comes open, and the men go in, and you go in with them. You carry out sacks of wheat with your arms shaking past the farmer, who watches every sack, and his wife in the doorway of the house with 2 children behind her skirts, watching, and a girl your own age at the window watching, and nobody curses you, which is worse. You load the wagon. Your certificate paper flutters in the farmer's fist, and the column moves on to the next farm, and you learn that day the last lesson of the Valley Forge winter, the one under all the others, that a revolution is not a pamphlet. It is choosing with your actual hands on an actual morning which wrong thing you can live with. The army starves or the barn opens. There is no third door. You ate the bread that came from that wheat 2 days later, hut-baked, half-raw, and it sat in you like a stone, and you ate every crumb. And that night back in the hut Jonah Pratt's fever came on. You knew it the moment you came in the door before anyone spoke. The hut smelled different. Sweetish, sourish, under the smoke. The smell you already knew from the hospital detail. And Jonah was in the bunk above yours with 2 blankets on him. Other men's blankets, given up in silence. And he was shaking hard enough that the bunk poles knocked against the wall. Tick, 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 like the loose roof shake. And when you put your hand on his forehead, it was like putting your hand on the kettle stone. "I'm all right," he said, teeth clattering. "It's just the cold got in." He was 16. He was a ropemaker's son from Norwich. He had lied about his age to get into this, and above you all winter, every night, his breath had been the sound you fell asleep to. Say it now, before the story goes on, because he would want it plain and no fuss. Jonah Pratt does not see Connecticut again. But that comes later. Tonight there is only the fever, and the hut making its quiet arrangements around it, the way the hut does. Cyrus boils water. Ben, who has no shirt, gives up his blanket too, and sits the night wrapped in an empty flour sack by the fire, feeding it splinter by splinter. And you sit up against the bunk post with your cracked hands in your lap, listening to the pebble rattle in Jonah's breathing, keeping count of it, as if counting were a kind of guard duty, as if a sentry standing his post carefully enough could keep this out too. You can't. But you stand it anyway. That's the whole army, this February, in one smoky room, standing a post that can't be held and holding it. Morning comes anyway. Morning always comes anyway. And this particular morning, the 23rd of February, 1778, while you are helping Cyrus carry Jonah down the hill to the hospital huts on a litter made of tent pole and a blanket, a very strange procession is arriving at the far edge of camp, out on the Gulf Road, a sleigh and horses, and a large man in a bearskin-trimmed coat with a jewelled star on his chest the size of a saucer, and an Italian greyhound, an actual lapdog riding beside him, and aides, and a French cook. The large man surveys the frozen, starving, half-naked city on the hillside. What he sees would make a European officer turn his sleigh around. No uniforms, no system, no two regiments drilled alike, sentries in blanket robes, an army that any professional would certify is already dead. He does not turn the sleigh around. He will say later the thing that becomes his famous verdict on this camp, and it is worth hearing exactly, because it is the hinge on which this whole winter turns. No European army could have held together in such circumstances. His name, or the version of it he goes by, is Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben. He claims to be a lieutenant general of the great Frederick of Prussia. He is actually a half-pay captain, unemployed, in debt, and armoured in magnificent exaggerations. He speaks no English at all. And in the next 10 weeks, this fat, roaring, profane, brilliant fraud is going to take the frozen scarecrow army of Valley Forge and turn it into the thing that wins the war. You, us and Merrill, are going to be standing in the front rank when he does it. But tonight, you don't know any of that. Tonight you only know that Jonah's litter is heavier going downhill than it should be, and that the hospital hut smells like the thing you will not name, and that the orderly says leave him, we'll see to him, in a voice that has said it 400 times, and that you walk back up the hill in the blue dusk with Cyrus, neither of you speaking, past the huts, past the fires, past the sound of 12,000 men enduring, and the wind has swung easterly, and on it, very faint, from 18 miles away, or from nowhere, from inside your own skull, you would swear you can hear violins. You hear the Baron before you see him. Everyone hears the Baron before they see him. It is the last day of February, 6 days after the sleigh came up the Gulf Road, and you're on wood detail near the Grand Parade, the long flat field at the centre of camp where nothing has happened all winter except mud, and there is a voice rolling across it in German, then in French, then in something that is not any language at all, a pure roar of frustration shaped like words, and you put down the drag rope and look, because everyone within a quarter mile has put down what they are holding and looked. There is a fat man in the middle of the parade. He is standing in snow mud to his ankles in boots that cost more than your farm, and he has a star on his chest that catches the weak sun like a signal mirror. And he's surrounded by a small knot of shivering soldiers, and he is teaching them personally with his own hands how to stand, not how to fight, how to stand, where the feet go, where the weight sits, what the shoulders do. And here is the thing that makes it strange, the thing that makes men drift toward the parade edge from 3 directions to watch. Generals do not do this. Not in any army on earth. In the British Army, in the French Army, in the Prussian Army the Baron came from, drill is beneath a sergeant's dignity, let alone an officer's. A gentleman does not touch a private soldier's elbow to move it 2 inches, and this man with the diamond star, This man, they say, dined with Frederick the Great and arrived with a French cook and a greyhound, is down in the freezing mud gripping a Connecticut farm boy's shoulders and turning them gently like a father squaring up a son for church. You don't know it yet, but you are watching the birth of the American army. The actual birth. Not the flags, not the declarations. This. A fat Prussian's hands on a private's shoulders in the mud saying, through an interpreter, again. 2 weeks later, the order comes down through the brigade and Sergeant Hale ducks into the hut at evening count with a paper in his fist and a look on his face you can't read, and he says, "Merrill, you're wanted." Your stomach drops through the floor of the hut. Wanted in an army is never good. Wanted is a court-martial witness or a burial detail or 100 lashes for something your company did that you didn't hear about. Wanted for what, Sergeant? The model company, Hale says, and now you can read his face, and what it says is, I put your name in, and you'd better not shame me. The Barons picked 100 men out of the whole army. 100 out of 10,000. His Excellency's own guard and picked men from the line. The Baron drills you, you drill everyone else. You start tomorrow on the Grand Parade at daybreak. The hut goes quiet. Then Ben Ostrander, wrapped in his flour sack by the fire, starts to laugh, low and delighted. Asa Merrill, he says, the schoolmaster to the Continental Army. God help the Continental Army. You do not sleep much that night. Some of it is nerves. Most of it is the bunk above you, which is empty now, and has been empty for 4 days, because Jonah is still down in the hospital hut by the creek, and the last time you visited he knew your face but not your name, and the orderly would not meet your eyes, and you have been sleeping badly beneath that empty bunk ever since, the way you'd sleep badly beside a hole in the ice. Daybreak on the Grand Parade, the 15th of March, or near enough. 100 men in 2 ranks. You're in the front rank, 3rd from the right, and your feet, in the new French shoes that finally came up the supply line in early March, actual shoes, stiff as boards and worth more to you than gold, are placed exactly where the Baron's interpreter said to place them, heels together, toes turned out, and you are trying to breathe quietly because the Baron is walking the line. Up close he's bigger than you thought, and older, and his face under the cocked hat is heavy and pouched and shrewd, and the famous star is right there, a hand's width from your face as he passes, a sunburst of brilliance around an enamel centre, and he smells, this close, of tobacco and cologne. Actual cologne, the first scent that is not smoke or rot or bodies that your nose has met in 3 months, and it is so foreign, so completely from another world, that your eyes water. He stops at the man beside you. He looks the man over, boots to hat, the way Cyrus looks over a barrel stave. He reaches out and moves the man's musket 1 inch on his shoulder. 1 inch. He steps back, looks again, nods, moves on. He stops at you. You stare straight ahead at the grey hills across the Schuylkill and your heart is louder than the wind. His hand comes into the edge of your sight and takes your chin, thumb and forefinger and lifts it. 1/2 inch, no more, and he says something in French, short to the interpreter, and moves on down the line. You stand there with your chin where he put it, burning with something you couldn't name if you had a week. The interpreter, passing, translates without slowing. He says, "Head up. You're not looking for potatoes. You're a soldier of liberty." A soldier of liberty. From a Prussian drill master with a diamond star. You keep your chin where he put it for the rest of your life. And then the work starts, and the work is like nothing the army has ever seen, because the Baron has done something no one in Europe would do. something that seems small and is enormous. He has thrown away the book. Every army drills by a manual. The British use theirs. 60 motions to load and fire. Evolutions layered on evolutions, drilled into men over years, with the lash as the schoolmaster. The Baron looked at this army. 10,000 farmers and shoemakers and fishermen with one campaign season left before the British come out of Philadelphia. And he sat up nights in his quarters writing a new drill, an American drill, cut to the bone. Fewer motions, simpler steps. Every command chosen so it can be shouted, heard and obeyed in wind and smoke. He writes it in French at night. An aide translates it into English by candle. And in the morning what he wrote at midnight is being stamped into the mud of the Grand Parade by 200 feet. And what doesn't work is thrown away by afternoon, and what works is kept. And in this way, week by week, an army is being written like a book, and you are one of the letters. The marching step, 75 paces to the minute, the whole army in one rhythm, so that a column moves like water instead of like a crowd leaving church. The wheel, the countermarch, the deployment from column into line, which sounds like nothing and is everything, because battles are lost in exactly that minute. The naked minute when an army strung out along a road must turn itself sideways into a wall of muskets before the enemy arrives, and at Brandywine and Germantown last autumn that minute took this army half an hour, and men died of the difference. And the bayonet. The Baron is a fanatic about the bayonet because he has seen the returns. He knows the truth this army is ashamed of. American soldiers fear the bayonet. They break and run from the steel. They use the thing to roast meat over fires, when there is meat, and every British officer knows it. And every British attack ends with lowered steel and a cheer for precisely that reason. So hour after hour on the parade you learn the positions, the guard, the thrust, the parry, your hands on the cold musket in the cold wind, lunging at sacks of straw until your shoulders shake, and the Baron waddles down the rank correcting elbows, and something is changing in the men. You can feel it changing, the way you can feel ice going rotten before it breaks. The steel is becoming yours. But none of that, not the step, not the wheel, not the bayonet, is the thing you will remember. The thing you will remember is the swearing. The Baron cannot speak English, and drill is failure. That is what drill is. 100 men getting it wrong slightly less each hour. And when the wheel collapses into a mob for the 4th time, the Baron's patience, which is not large, bursts like a powder horn. He roars in German. The men stand blinking. He roars in French. Nothing. And then, purple, stamping, waving his cane at heaven, he bellows across the parade to his young aide, and this happens. This is sworn to by men who are standing where you are standing. Come here, swear at them for me. God damn their stupidity in English. And the aide does, formally, at the top of his lungs. A second-hand cursing delivered on behalf of the general, and the 100 men of the model company stand rigid, faces cracking, tears of held laughter freezing on cheeks, and the Baron watches them fight it, and then his own face goes, and the whole line breaks, 100 starving men and a fat Prussian Baron howling together in the mud, and then he wipes his eyes and barks one word everyone has learned by now. Encore. Again, and the line reforms, and that right there is why it works. Think of where these men have been. All winter the army's discipline has been the discipline of misery, of lash sentences read out on this same parade, of things endured because there was no strength left to resist them. And now comes a man, a European nobleman, the most exotic creature in camp, who rages at them not with contempt but with a kind of furious love, who tells them, and writes it down in a letter home that survives, that the American soldier is a marvel, that you must explain to him why he does a thing, and then he does it, which no Prussian, no Englishman, no Frenchman would ever require. He learns their names, he asks what they ate, he gives dinners at his quarters for junior officers on the strict condition, his own joke, that no man may attend in whole breeches, torn clothes required at the door, and they come, and they roar, and they drill for him next morning like men possessed. The army has been starved, frozen, ignored, unpaid, and pitied. Nobody, all winter, has demanded anything of it. The Baron demands everything. And it turns out that is the food the army was actually dying for. You drill the model company for 2 weeks, and then the model company is broken up like a fire being spread, and now you are the teacher. You, Asa Merrill, 19, of Litchfield, standing in front of a platoon of your own 4th Connecticut on a brigade parade, calling the step, correcting elbows, moving a man's musket 1 inch on his shoulder, and Sergeant Hale stands off to the side with his arms folded, watching you do it, and says nothing, and his silence is the largest promotion you have ever received. This is happening everywhere, all across the 2,000 acres, all through late March and April. Stand anywhere high in camp on the slope of Mount Joy, say, and look down, and where the winter showed you smoke and mud and stillness, now the whole bowl of land is moving, brigade parades on every flat, columns wheeling, muskets flashing in long ripples as 10,000 men learn to load in unison, drums beating the step from morning gun to evening gun, and the sound of it all mixed together and rising off the hillsides is unmistakable and new. It is the sound of an army being born out of the body of a mob, and the mud is drying, and the shadder coming up the Schuylkill, whole silver rivers of fish, and men stand in the shallows netting them by the hundredweight, and there is fish smoking on racks all through the camps, actual protein, actual grease on actual fingers, and the supply roads are open, and a new quartermaster general, the Rhode Island Quaker Nathaniel Greene, has taken the broken wagon system apart like a bad barrel and rebuilt it, and flour comes in, and beef comes in, salt, rum even, shirts, and one morning in April you draw a full ration, a full one, bread and beef both, and you sit on the woodpile outside the hut eating it slowly in the pale sun, and partway through you find that you have to stop and put your face in your hands for a moment, because your body, without asking you, has begun to believe it will live. Jonah Pratt died in the hospital hut on the 9th of March. You want it to have been a scene. It wasn't a scene. That is the truth about this winter's dying, and you owe him the truth. 2,000 men die at Valley Forge, and almost none of them die in battle-shaped ways. No volleys, no flags. They die of typhus and dysentery and pneumonia in long, dim huts that smell of the grave, on straw that is never changed because there is no straw, tended by orderlies who are themselves half sick, and they die mostly in the small hours, quietly, between one rattling breath and no breath, and the man in the bunk beside them notices at dawn. Cyrus was with him the evening before. That was the mercy. Cyrus had walked down with a piece of smoked fish wrapped in a rag, and Jonah was clear-headed for a little while. The fever does that near the end. It opens a window, and he talked about Norwich, about the rope walk, the long shed where his father worked, 300 feet of twisted hemp, and the smell of tar. and how he used to walk backward down its whole length paying out yarn, and how you could tell every rope his father ever made because of a trick he did with the final splice. And then he said he was tired, and Cyrus came up the hill in the dark, and in the morning the orderly met you at the hospital door and didn't have to say anything. You helped bury him. The burial ground past the artillery park is on a slope, and the spring thaw had softened the top foot of soil and no more, so the digging was pick work, and there were 4 other burials that morning. There were burials every morning and no coffin. Cloth is for the living, and the chaplain was quick, because the chaplain had 4 more to do, and you stood at the graveside with Cyrus and Ben and the others from the hut, 12 men minus 1, and the drums of a brigade at drill came up the hill from the parade, steady, 75 to the minute. And the 2 sounds happened together, the pick dirt going down onto the blanket and the drums learning the step, and you understood standing there that these were not 2 different stories, they were one story. The army that was being born on the parade was being paid for on this slope, grave by grave, and Jonah Pratt of Norwich, 16 years old, ropemaker's son, was part of the price, and the price was mostly paid by the youngest and the poorest, the boys with the thinnest blankets, and no one would ever build him a statue, and the country he died for did not exist yet. You put a stone at the head of the grave, not a marker, markers weren't allowed, wolves and grave robbers, but a stone, flat, the size of a bread loaf, half sunk, so only you would know. And you went back up the hill, and at afternoon parade you called the step for your platoon with your voice absolutely level, and that too you learned at Valley Forge, and you will spend the rest of your life deciding whether it was a thing gained or a thing lost. March at Valley Forge is a month with 2 faces, and it shows you both of them in the same week, sometimes in the same afternoon. There are days when the sun comes up the valley soft and yellow, and the icicles along the hut eaves let go one by one, plink plink into the mud, and men stand in the doorways with their shirts open like lizards on a stone. And there are days when winter comes back out of the northwest with its whole fist, sleet riding sideways on the wind, the drill suspended, the wood details staggering in bent double, and the hut fills again with the old smells and the old silence, and you remember that the season is not done with you, that it is only playing you the way a cat plays a thing it has already caught. It is on one of the soft days, the deceiving days, that the surgeon comes for your arm. You have known it was coming. The orders went out in general orders weeks ago, and the talk has gone around every fire since. The whole army, every man who has not had the smallpox, is to be inoculated. Not vaccinated. That word doesn't exist yet. That mercy is 20 years away. Inoculated, the old way, the frightening way, variolation, which means this. They take the living matter of the disease itself, from the sores of a man who has it, and they put it into your body on purpose, through a cut in your arm, and then you get smallpox. Actually get it. The gamble, and it is a gamble, is that the pox taken through the skin runs milder than the pox taken through the breath. That you'll be sick for 2 or 3 weeks, feverish, sore-covered, wretched, and then rise immune for life, instead of catching it the natural way some crowded winter and dying at the natural rate, which everyone knows, which is 1 man in 6, or worse. Washington ordered it done to the whole army the winter before at Morristown, over the doubts of Congress and half his own officers, and he is ordering it again now for every new man and every man missed. Thousands of inoculations run through the camp in waves, in secrecy where possible. because an army with a third of its men deliberately sick is an army inviting attack. And this, though you don't know to call it this, is one of the great decisions of the entire war. A commander choosing the certain controlled sickness over the possible uncontrolled plague. Medicine as strategy, made by a man who caught the pox himself at 19 in Barbados, and carries the scars of it on his face to this day, faint pits you can see when he rides close, the oldest campaign badge in the army, none of which makes the surgeon's table less frightening when it is your turn at it. The inoculation hut smells of vinegar and tallow smoke, and underneath the sweetish hospital smell you know too well now, the surgeon's mate is a fast-handed young man from Philadelphia with his sleeves rolled, and on the table beside him is a lancet and a jar, and you do not look closely at the jar. Cyrus went through it 2 weeks ago, and told you the whole procedure over the fire in his flat Cooper's voice, which was his way of being kind, because the thing you can see coming frightens less than the thing you can't. Still, your mouth is dry as ash when the mate takes your arm. "Farm boy," he says, turning your forearm over, finding the place. "Connecticut. Good. Farm boys do well. You've had the cowpox off the udders, half of you, though nobody knows what that's worth." He says this the way men say things they've said 400 times. The lancet touches. It is less than you braced for. A scratch, a sting, a smear, a strip of linen bound round done next man, and you walk out into the deceiving sunshine with the future under your skin, and for 8 days nothing happens, and you almost let yourself believe you are one of the ones it doesn't take in. On the 9th day it takes you. You spend the next 2 weeks in the sick hut set aside for the inoculated, and you will spare yourself most of it, because a man's own fever is the dullest story in the world, but keep 2 things. Keep the ache, the deep bone ache that lives behind the eyes and in the small of the back, and the sores rising on your hands and face like slow blisters of wax, and the itching, dear God, the itching, and the orderly's voice saying, "Scratch and you'll wear the scars to your grave, boy," and how you lay on your hands at night to keep them honest. And keep this, the second thing, the good thing, the man in the next bunk, a Virginia rifleman with the same pox on him, teaching you card games left-handed through the worst of it. Both of you too sick to sit up, playing on a board laid across the gap between the bunks, and how the days went by that way. Fever and cards and the rain on the roof, and how you came out the far side of it in early April, 11 pounds lighter, weak as a foal, marked with 3 small pits on your jaw that you will carry to your grave anyway, and immune for life, carrying from this month forward one less way to die in a world that has never before in its history been able to hand a man such a thing. The army does this winter to itself by the 1,000, and it works. The pox does not burn through Valley Forge the way it burned through the Northern Army in Canada 2 years ago, when whole regiments melted before they ever saw a red coat. The historians will call it one of the quiet, decisive acts of the war. You just call it April, and being able to eat again, and Ben Ostrander's face when you walk back into the hut, and him saying, solemn as a deacon, that the pox has improved your looks and your mother should write the surgeon a letter of thanks. Convalescent men get light duty, and light duty one grey morning sends you to headquarters. There is a paper to carry, brigade returns, sealed, from the brigade major to the adjutant general's office, which sits where everything sits, at the small stone house by the creek mouth, and you walk down through the camp with the packet buttoned inside your coat, feeling important and trying not to show it. Down past the artillery park with its ranked guns under their tarpaulins, past the bake ovens breathing their warm bread breath into the cold, along the creek where the ice is rotten now and dark water shows in the seams, to the house. It is small. That is the first thing. The thing that always startles the visitors 2 centuries later and startles you now. The commander of the armies of the United States has his headquarters in a stone farmhouse that would be a middling prosperous home in Litchfield. 2 rooms down, a few up, rented from the family of a Quaker widow, and around it the life of the army's brain swirls in a mud yard. Aids horses hitched and steaming, express riders coming and going, a log annex built on for the office overflow, sentries of the Commander-in-Chief's guard at the door in the best uniforms in camp, which is to say, in whole uniforms. You hand your packet through the proper hands and are told to wait on the answer, and so you stand in the yard by the wall out of the wind, and for half an hour you are given, free, the thing men will pay money to imagine later, the ordinary sound of the revolution being run. Through the window, quills, actual quills scratching, several of them, steady as rain, because this war, more than powder, runs on paper. The young gentlemen of the staff, Hamilton, Laurens, Tilghman, names that mean nothing to you yet, drafting and copying again, returns, requisitions, intelligence, the general's vast correspondence going out over the whole continent, and a voice dictating, low and even, pausing, resuming. A woman crosses the yard from the kitchen annex with a covered dish, and an aide holds the door, and you glimpse through it, firelight and a table of papers and the back of a tall figure standing at the window, with his hands clasped behind him, looking out at the river, and then the door closes, and you find you've been holding your breath, and you let it go, white in the cold air, feeling like a boy who has looked through a knot-hole at the works of a mill and seen the great wheel turning. The answer comes out, sealed, and you carry it back up the hill, and that is the whole adventure, and you tell it at the fire that night with, Ben says, more detail than the taking of Quebec, and you don't care. You saw the wheel. Not everything the spring shows you is a thing you want to keep. There's a morning in April on the Grand Parade before drill, when the brigades are formed in a hollow square, 3 sides of men facing inward, and you have been in the army long enough to know what a hollow square at morning means, and your stomach knows it too. In the open side stand a drummer, a man tied by his wrists to the sergeant's halberds crossed and planted, his shirt off, his back bare and white in the cold, and the brigade major on his horse with the court-martial's sentence in his hand, reading it out in the flat carrying voice they use. The man is a private of the Pennsylvania line, taken 3 miles beyond the picket without a pass, with a sack of shirts that were not his shirts, sentenced by court-martial to 100 lashes on the bare back. Well laid on, well laid on. That is in the sentence. That is the actual formula. You have seen this before. Everyone has. Army punishment is public on purpose. That is its entire theory. But seeing it does not become nothing, and it should not. And you make yourself keep your eyes up because the orders are to witness, and because looking away feels like a lie. The drummers take it in turns. That is the custom. Fresh arms every 25, and the drum major counts, and the sound is not what people imagine, not a crack, but a flat, wet slap. And the man takes the first 30 in silence, which men do out of pride, and does not take the rest in silence, which men also do out of flesh. And the surgeon stands by with his folded arms and his professional eye, because the surgeon's job at a flogging is to say when to stop, and at 70 odd he says it, and the man is cut down and taken away face grey and shaking, to have his back dressed with salt and vinegar, which is the mercy and feels like the opposite, and the square is dismissed to drill. And here is what you take away from it, chewing it over for days, because it will not lie quiet. Not outrage exactly, though there is some of that, and not approval, God knows. What you take away is the arithmetic nobody says aloud. 100 lashes for stolen shirts, in an army whose men have not been paid since autumn, whose Congress's paper money buys less every month, whose contract with these men has been broken in every clause but one, and the one unbroken clause is this one, the lash clause discipline, the only debt the army never fails to pay in full and on time. Cyrus, who watched beside you with his Cooper's face shut tight, says only one thing about it at the fire that night. British Navy gives 1,000 lashes and calls it mercy. We give 100 and call it a republic. Long way to go yet. And he spits in the fire, which is how Cyrus files a thing under finished, and you file it under not finished, where it stays. Because the other side of that coin is being spent on the same parade, the same weeks, and you are part of the spending. The barren system is doing something to punishment itself, something you can feel shifting under the army's feet. He is teaching the officers, forcing them, order by order, inspection by inspection, that a company is not a gang you rent and flog, it is a made thing you are answerable for, that the captain must know every man's name, his health, the state of his feet, the state of his musket, that the officer who cannot account for his men's misery has no business punishing their crimes. Fewer squares form on the parade as the spring goes on, not none, fewer. An army is a slow ship to turn, but you can stand on the deck and feel the rudder bite. Light duty ends, full duty resumes, and full duty in April, besides the drill, means the works. The lines of Valley Forge, the trenches and forts that made the hillside a fortress no British general ever thought worth the price of storming, were scratched into frozen ground in the desperate first weeks. And now, with the earth open and the campaign season coming, the engineers want them made real, deepened, revetted, extended, and so you spend long April days on the inner line with a pick and a wheelbarrow that has known better decades. And this is its own education, because the works are French. The chief engineer of the army is a French volunteer, de Portail, one of the professional officers the alliance rumour has been trailing behind it for a year, and the works go where he says they go. And the first thing you learn, hauling dirt for him, is that a fort is an argument. Every angle of the redoubt is a sentence in it. The guns here command that road. The ditch is this deep because a man is that tall. The two hills, joy and misery, are the anchors. The river is the moat, and the whole position says to General Howe in Philadelphia in clear French, translated into earth, the price is more than the goods. Howe read the argument all winter and agreed with it and stayed home. And men in your hut grumbled all winter that the war was nothing but digging, and the digging, it turns out, was the war, was winning it quietly every single week by making the army too expensive to kill. The second thing you learn is simpler and lives in your body to this day. Clay is heavier in April than in any other month, wet with snow melt, sucking at the spade. 12 hours of it leaving your palms re-cracked along the winter's old lines, and your back a single long complaint. And yet there is a strange contentment in works duty that the winter never once offered, because you can see it. That is the whole of it. All winter the army's labour vanished as it was performed. Wood burned, snow fell again, the sick list ate the days. Now you lean on the pick at evening gun and look back down 100 yards of clean-cut trench that was not there at dawn. Dirt you moved, a fact in the earth, and something in a farmer's son settles at the sight like a dog by a fire. The works will outlast everything. Grassed over, softened, 2.5 centuries old, The line's your pick cutter in that hillside park right now, tonight, and children walk along them eating ice cream and have no idea, and that is fine. That was the point. The argument held. Sundays, now that the roads are open and the country people have decided the army might live, there is the market. General orders established it. Official market days, twice a week at the stone bridge and by the adjutant's office. Farm folk to be protected and paid, and it is the best free entertainment in camp. The farmers come in with carts of what the winter left them, eggs, greens, seed potatoes, hard cider, a hen with opinions in a wicker cage, and the haggling between Pennsylvania Dutch farm wives and Continental soldiers with 3 currencies of doubtful paper in their pockets is conducted in 2.5 languages at full volume, and is better than a play. You have no money, your pay being a rumour since November, so you go to look, which is free, and to smell, which is almost eating. But Ben of the turnip, Ben the shirtless, has spent the winter accumulating a trader's hoard of the camp's true currencies, needles, thread, a spare flint, a folding knife won at cards from the Virginia rifleman, and you watch him work a market morning the way you'd watch the Baron drill, a master in his element, and he comes away one Sunday with 6 eggs, an actual half-pound of butter, and a twist of real tea, and that night the hut eats eggs fried in butter, 12 men, half an egg apiece. And the sound around that fire, the low, helpless, laughing groan of men tasting fat and salt, you will hear it in your mind's ear at every good meal for the next 60 years. And then, some evenings, there is the hardest duty of all, harder than the picket, harder than the pick, and it is done sitting down. The regiment owns 2 pencils and a bottle of ink that is mostly water, and paper is worth its weight in tobacco, and by firelight, in a hut gone quiet, men write home. You have put it off since February. You know why, and every man bent over a kneeboard around you knows why, each for his own reason, because the truth is unwritable and lies are heavy to carry. Your mother can read, your father can't, so whatever you write will be read aloud at the table in Lichfield in your mother's voice, with your father staring into the fire and your sisters gone still, and that room is present to you, unbearably present, as you sit with the pencil stub in your cracked fingers over the back of a ruined return sheet. And what is there to say into that room? Jonah, whom they knew from your letters, who was a joke and a name at their table, is under a stone with no name on it past the artillery park. You have boiled and drunk your own shoes. You have taken wheat from a Quaker at implied gunpoint. You have been paid nothing and promised everything, and you have never in your life been so proud of anything as you are of this ruined, deathless army. And none of these sentences can be sent to Lichfield. So you write what soldiers write. In every army, in every century, the letter that is a blanket laid over the war, that you are well, thank God, and have had the smallpox the light way and are past it, that the winter was hard but the worst is over and provisions now come regular, that a Prussian baron, a great character, is teaching the whole army its trade, and you have been chosen among 100 to learn it first, and Sergeant Hale says you may make corporal by summer, tell father. That France has come into the war, and all here believe the tide is turned, that you think often of the farm and would give a month's pay when it comes for 1 hour at her table, and that she is not to worry, and that you are her obedient son. Every word of it is true. That is the trick of such letters, the trick you learn at 19 by firelight. You do not lie, you select. And the unsent letter, the real one, the one with the crows crying no meat, and the wet slap of the lash and the stone the size of a bread loaf. You fold that one away and the policemen keep them behind the breastbone, where it will stay folded for years and come open, without warning, on some ordinary evening decades away, at the smell of green oak smoke or the sound of a drum, and your grandchildren will see your face change and ask, "What is it, grandfather?" And you will say nothing, and it will not be nothing. It will be this hillside. It never stops being this hillside. You seal the Lichfield letter with a drop of borrowed wax and send it down to the post with the regiment's bundle, and it goes out over the terrible roads toward Connecticut at the speed of a walking horse, and some evening in May, at a farm table 4 days' ride from anywhere you have bled, a woman will read it aloud twice and put it in the Bible and go on setting supper with her mouth pressed tight and her eyes bright. And that too is the war, and no monument will ever be raised to it, and it held the whole thing up. One more night from that spring, and then the story can go on, because the story is impatient now. The story can smell June coming. It is the middle of April, past midnight, and you are dead asleep in the bunk when the world ends. Drums, not the morning drum, the long roll, the alarm, every drummer in camp beating it at once in the dark, and the hut detonates around you. 12 men out of sleep and into equipment in a black chaos of elbows and blasphemy that would be comedy if your heart were not trying to climb out through your throat, and you are formed in the company street with your musket and 60 rounds inside 4 minutes, which in December would have taken 40, and the whole hillside is the same, brigades pouring onto their alarm posts under the cold stars, the works manning, the guns' crews closed up, 10,000 men going from sleep to line of battle in the time it takes a kettle to boil, and you stand in your place in the dark with your breath soaring, and the man on either side of you solid as fence posts waiting for the British Army. The British Army does not come. It was a picket firing on horsemen down the Gulf Road, dragoons or shadows or a farmer's strayed animals, no one will ever be sure, and after an hour, rigid in the starlight, the brigades are stood down, and the army flows back into its 1,000 huts, grumbling magnificently, robbed of its battle, and Ben declares that he had personally selected the Hessian he was going to bayonet and considers himself jilted. But walking back up the company street in the dark, Sergeant Hale falls in beside you for a few paces and says quietly, not to you exactly, to the night, 4 minutes. In December this army couldn't have found its own muskets in 4 minutes. And he says nothing else, and peels off toward his own hut, and you lie back down in the smoky dark with your heart still loping, and you understand that you have just fought an engagement after all, the whole army has, against the only enemy that mattered this winter, the army it used to be. And won. The empty bunk above you gets a new man in April the way empty bunks do. A Massachusetts transfer, older, quiet, snores like a sawpit. The hut adjusts. The hut always adjusts. But some nights, on the edge of sleep, you still listen for the rattle and hear the sawpit instead, and lie awake a moment in the smoke dark, keeping a count that no longer needs keeping. Spring does other strange things to the camp. Martha Washington has been at the little stone house since February, and it has changed the gravity of the place in ways you wouldn't have believed a single middle-aged Virginia lady could manage. She goes to the hospital huts, not once for show, regularly, with baskets, with knitted socks, with the wives of the other generals in tow, and men who had not softened for God, or the lash go quiet and shy when she sits by their straw. And word of every visit crosses the camp by nightfall, because the army is a small town and she is proof, walking proof in a plain wool gown that somebody in the world above them gives a damn. And there are the other women, the ones the history books will take 200 years to notice. The hundreds of camp women, soldiers' wives, washerwomen, nurses, hucksters, who wintered on this hillside too, drew half rations, buried their own children in that same sloped ground, and boiled the army shirts in lye all spring in the great delousing that the doctors finally forced through, because the fever, they had come to understand, rode on the lice, kettles steaming down every brigade street, women stirring linen with paddles, men standing wrapped in blankets waiting for their only shirt, everyone scalded pink and swearing, and the graveyard slope by May growing quieter, though it never once goes silent. There's an oven now, too, a whole bakery, run by a man you'd never invent if you were making this up. Christopher Ludwig, a Philadelphia gingerbread baker, German-born, who came to Congress and refused the profiteers' contract they offered him, said, and this is recorded, that he did not wish to get rich by the war, and asked instead for the title Baker General and the chance to make honest bread. 100 pounds of flour into 135 pounds of bread, he promised, because waterways and other contractors had been pocketing the difference for 2 years. His bread reaches your hut warm some mornings. You did not know until this spring that warm was a flavour. And underneath everything, running through the camp all April like water under ice, there is the rumour. France. The rumour is France. It has come up the roads in fragments since late winter, in newspapers, in letters, in the talk of express riders, that the news of Saratoga, the great victory in the north last October, 17 British regiments surrendered whole, had crossed the ocean and landed in Paris like a spark in a powder magazine. That the King of France was persuaded. That papers had been signed in February, actual treaties, alliance and commerce, France and the United States signed while you were boiling shoe leather. That French money, French muskets, and, Mother of God, the French fleet, the only navy on earth that can fight the Royal Navy, were coming into the war on your side. If it's true, everything changes. Not slowly. All at once. Britain can bully 13 colonies at the end of a 3,000-mile supply line. Britain cannot do that while fighting France everywhere on earth at the same time, in the Channel, in the Sugar Islands, in India. If it's true, the men in Philadelphia, the warm men, the goose and oyster men, are suddenly the ones 18 miles from a problem. If it's true, the camp has been burned by rumours before. Men hold this one carefully at arm's length like a coal they want and don't trust. Then, on the last day of April, an express rider comes up the Gulf Road on a lathered horse, and does not slow at the picket, and goes straight through to the stone house by the creek, and within a day it is everywhere, in general orders, read out at the head of every brigade, and it is true. All of it, signed, sealed, ratified, real. The treaties are made. France is in. Washington, whose letters all winter were the letters of a man holding a dying animal together with his hands, writes now, and it survives, that he believes an upper hand has been given, and orders the army to mark the occasion. Not with a speech, with the grandest thing an 18th century army knows how to do. A feu de joie, a fire of joy. You've never heard of a feu de joie. By the 5th of May, you have drilled for one. Here is what it is, so you can see it coming. The whole army, every brigade, thousands of muskets, forms in 2 immense lines, rank behind rank, stretching more than a field along the slope of the inner works. Cannon on the flanks, and on the signal the artillery fires a salute, and then the musketry begins at the far right of the front line. One man, then the next, each soldier firing the instant the man beside him fires, so that a single unbroken thread of fire and sound runs down the entire front rank. A mile of army, man by man, like a fuse burning, and reaches the far left and leaps to the rear rank and runs all the way back, a ribbon of flame and thunder travelling the whole body of the army and returning, and then huzzah, on command from 10,000 throats, and then the whole thing again and again. It is a salute. It is also, and every officer on both sides of this war knows it, a demonstration. A feu de joie is the single hardest simple thing an army can do. It cannot be faked. Every man must load fast, hold steady, and fire on a hair-trigger cue in exact sequence with strangers a mile away. A mob with muskets attempting a running fire produces a stuttering, overlapping mess, and everyone within earshot hears exactly what that army is. A drilled army produces one long, clean-rolling roar, and everyone within earshot hears exactly what that army is too. The British will hear it in their outposts. The farmers will hear it for 10 miles. The army that crawled onto this hillside in December, bleeding from its bare feet, is going to stand up in May and announce, in a mile of running fire, what the Baron's mud-stamped winter has made of it. The 5th of May, the night before, your hut does not sleep much, and for once it is not the cold, and not the hunger, and not the cough above you. Cyrus is putting an edge on his bayonet with a stone. Slow circles, shick, not because tomorrow needs a sharp bayonet, but because his hands want work. Ben has, by means no one questions any more, produced a ribbon, an actual green ribbon, and is binding up his queue like a man going courting. Your new French shoes are greased. Your cartridge box holds the blank charges, counted twice. Your musket, the one that roasted no meat all winter because there was no meat, is cleaner than any object you have ever owned. Outside, up and down the Brigade Street, fires burn late, and men are singing, low, not the sad songs, and somewhere a fife is trying the new marches, and the spring peepers are shrieking down in the wet ground by the creek, thousands of them, the sound of the earth itself coming back to life, and you stand in the hut doorway in the mild dark and think about a January night on the picket line when you could not feel your feet, and a boy in the bunk above you with a rattle in his breath, and you think, tomorrow we answer. Tomorrow for Jonah, for the blood in the snow, for the crows crying no meat into the dark, for the farmer's closed face and the certificate in his fist, for every man on the sloped ground past the artillery park. Tomorrow the army speaks. The 6th of May, 1778, comes up clear. You're awake before the morning gun, all of you, and the hut is strange with quiet purpose. 12 men dressing in the dark like farmers on a wedding day. And when you step out into the Brigade Street, the light is just coming grey-gold over the ridge of Mount Joy, and the whole city of huts is already moving, thousands of men in the half-light, and the smell of the morning is wood smoke and wet spring earth and gun oil, and somewhere down toward the grand parade the drums begin. It starts, of all things, with church. 9 o'clock every brigade assembles by its parade, and the chaplains read out the announcement of the alliance and give thanks, and you stand bareheaded in the ranks in the strengthening sun, while a Connecticut parson with a voice like a cross-cut saw tells 10,000 men that the Lord and the King of France have both, in their wisdom, taken an interest in their cause, and a kind of low warm sound moved through the ranks that is not quite laughter and not quite prayer. Then the signal, cannon, one gun, flat and huge in the morning air, and the brigades step off, and here is the first miracle of the day, the one the crowds of civilians up from the countryside will not even notice, because it looks like nothing. 10,000 men from a dozen different camps across 2,000 acres marched to their positions on the review ground and formed two lines, each nearly a mile long, and it takes minutes. Minutes. In December, this manoeuvre would have taken half a day and ended in a shouting mob. Today the columns come down the slopes from every direction like streams finding a river, wheel, deploy, dress their ranks, and stand fast. And the Baron, riding the line on his big horse with his star blazing, is watching his winter's work assemble itself, and men who are close enough will say afterward that the old fraud's face was shining like a boy's. You are in the front rank, your platoon, your regiment, Connecticut's place in the line, and the line runs out to your left and your right farther than you can see. An unbroken hedge of men and steel following the curve of the hillside, and the May sun is coming off 10,000 bayonets, actual sunlight off actual polished steel, the same steel this army used to run from, and above the line the new colours are out, and the breeze off the river takes them. Washington rides the whole front, slowly, hat off to the men, and the second miracle of the day is the sound the army does not make. No cheering yet, that comes later on command. Now there is only silence in the ranks as he passes, a mile of men holding still, and the silence is the loudest thing you have ever stood inside, because you know, every man knows what it is made of. It is made of December. He rode past you once in the frozen hut street and nodded at you over a wood pile, and now he rides past you in the sun in front of an army, and both of those men are the same man, and both of those armies are the same army, and that exactly is the point of today. Then the order, running down the line from the right, officers' voices relaying it battalion by battalion, and the ranks come to the load. And here is where your body simply takes over, because the Baron built this into your hands weeks ago. Cartridge, bite, prime, cask, charge, ram, return, present. 10,000 men loading blank charges in a long rippling flash of motion, and the ramrods come out and go back with the sound like a giant shuffling iron cards, and then stillness again. A mile of levelled muskets waiting on one word. The artillery goes first. 13 guns on the right, one for each state, and the first discharge slaps you in the chest from half a mile away. A physical push, and the smoke jumps off the muzzles in white balls, and the echo comes back off the hills across the Schuylkill a second later like the valley answering, and 13 times, and then the last echo dies, and there is one held breath of absolute quiet, spring birds, the creak, your own heart. And then, far off at the extreme right of the front line, so far away it begins as almost nothing, a single musket fires, and the fire starts to run. You hear it coming before it reaches you, and no one who has not stood in the line can quite be made to understand what it is like. But try. It is a sound like an enormous sheet of canvas being torn by a giant, slowly at first and then faster, a ripping crackle that is not many sounds but one continuous sound, travelling, coming down the line toward you at the speed of a run in fire, man by man by man, each musket a single stitch in a mile-long seam of flame, and the smoke lifts off the line as it comes like a wave rolling in from your right, and the sound gets bigger and bigger, and your cheek is on the stock and your eye is on the man beside you, on his lock, on his finger, because your entire task in this entire immense machine is one thing: Fire the instant he fires, and the tearing roar arrives. The man 2 down fires, the man beside you fires, a flash and slap of it right at your shoulder, and you fire, your musket kicks, your smoke joins the wave, and the fire is already past you, gone, running away down the line to your left, diminishing, a mile of it. And you stand in the drifting sulphur smell listening to your own single shot, being carried away inside a rolling thunder that 10,000 men are making 1 man at a time. It reaches the far left of the front line, it leaps to the second line, it comes running back, the whole mile behind you, the rear ranks turn, the tearing sheet of sound travelling the opposite way, and the smoke from both lines is climbing and joining into one long white cloud over the army. And when the last musket on the far right of the rear line fires, there is half a heartbeat of ringing silence. And then the command every man has been waiting for since December. Huzzah, long live the King of France. And 10,000 voices go up at once, and it is not a parade ground cheer, whatever the order said. It comes up out of the ranks like something breaking loose, out of chests that spent a winter learning what it cost to keep a voice alive, and the sound rolls up the hillside and over the huts and the burial ground and out over the river, and you are roaring with the rest of them. You can feel it tearing at your own throat and cannot hear yourself at all inside the ocean of it. They do the whole thing twice more. 3 rounds of running fire, 3 great cheers, the second for the friendly European powers, the third, the last. Huzzah for the American states. And by the 3rd round, the running fire is so clean, so unbroken, that the officers up and down the line are grinning like boys, because there are British ears in this countryside. There are always British ears, and every one of them is hearing the same message, and the message requires no translation. The army you left dying on that hill is not on that hill anymore. Something else is. Afterward the day goes soft and golden and unreal. The ranks are dismissed into celebration. There is a gill of rum per man, general orders, and all punishments in the camp are pardoned this day. Every man in the guardhouse walking out blinking into the sun, forgiven by the alliance. The officers, 1,000 of them, dine with Washington under a great canopy of tent cloth in the centre of camp, and the men drift the parade in loose, happy crowds, and there are wrestling matches and foot races and someone's fiddle, and civilians up from the farms moving through it all staring, and you find Cyrus and Ben by the Connecticut fires with fish and fresh bread and the rum, and Ben has somehow acquired a second green ribbon and is wearing both, and no one asks. And Cyrus raises his cup and says not loudly, "Jonah Pratt," and you drink. All of you. And nobody says anything else, because nothing else fits. And late in the afternoon, with the noise of the celebrating camp behind you, you do the thing you've been meaning to do since December, and never once had the strength or the daylight for. You climb Mount Joy. It is not a great mountain. It is a long wooded ridge at the camp's back, the anchor of the whole position, and the path up through the young leaves is soft with last year's oak litter, and the spring woods smell of green sap and warm bark, and your legs, climbing, inform you of every mile of this winter. But they climb, and near the top the trees open where the wood details cut through, and you come out onto the shoulder of the hill and you turn around, and there it is, all of it. The whole encampment lies below you in the low golden light. 2,000 acres of it, the hut city in its ranked streets, 1,000 plumes of evening smoke standing up straight in the still air, the lines of the earthworks drawn along the slopes like a signature, the grand parade still speckled with celebrating men, small as seeds, and the Schuylkill beyond, a band of hammered silver curving away east, and the Star Fort, and the little stone house by the creek mouth with its own thread of smoke, and farther, on the burial slope past the artillery park, a patch of turned earth that you can cover from here with your thumb, and you do not cover it with your thumb. You look at it, and then you lift your eyes because from this height you can see beyond the camp, out over the folded green country, ridge behind ridge going blue with distance, and somewhere out there under the farthest haze, 18 miles, is Philadelphia, where tonight the warm men are hearing reports of a mile of running fire and are beginning in their warm rooms to be afraid. You stand on the hill for a long time. The light goes from gold to copper. Below you, tiny, a drum beats retreat, and the sound arrives late and soft, like a memory of itself, and the smoke of the 1,000 fires turns rose-coloured, and you think about the boy who stood picket on the western slope in January on 2 blocks of wood that used to be his feet, and you look for that picket post and you find it. You can actually see it from here, a bare knuckle of hillside above the creek. Unremarkable, small, and it comes to you slowly, standing in the mild evening with your winter spread out below you like a map. That the distance between that boy and this one cannot be measured in miles or in months, and that you will spend the rest of your life coming down from this hill and never entirely arrive. The name of the hill is Mount Joy. The ridge across the little valley from it, its twin, its shadow, is called Mount Misery. The old names from long before the war, some traveller's bad night 100 years ago. The army camped exactly between them, all winter, in the gap where the 2 names look at each other. You notice this now from the top for the first time. You decide it is not a coincidence. You decide the whole winter has been the gap between those 2 names, and that the army walked into it from the Misery side, and is walking out on the side you're standing on. Then you go down, because the light is going, and there is a hut at the bottom with your name in it, and supper. After the 6th of May, the camp changes key. You can hear it change. The drills go on, harder than ever. The Baron, now officially Inspector General of the whole army, is everywhere at once. But the drills have a direction now, a lean to them, the way a plough horse leans when it can smell the barn. Everyone knows what is coming. The French fleet is at sea. Philadelphia, for the British, has gone overnight from a prize to a trap, a city at the end of a river that French warships can close like a door. The warm men are going to have to leave. The only questions are when and by what road, and whether this new army, this Valley Forge army, will be let off its hill to meet them when they do. May runs green and loud. The camp eats now, actually eats, beef and bread, and the endless blessed shad, and the sick lists shrink week by week, and new levies come up the roads from 5 states to fill the thinned regiments. Raw boys with soft hands who stare at the hut city and the veterans. At you. They stare at you, and you realise with a small shock that you have become the thing you found here in December. A soldier of the Continental Line, weathered, certain, terrifyingly competent with a musket, someone the new boys watch to learn how to stand. One of them, a 17-year-old from Wyndham with his mother's Bible sewn into his coat lining, gets the bunk above yours, and on his first night, when the strangeness of the hut has him lying rigid in the dark, you hear yourself say to the underside of his bunk quietly, "It gets easier. Give it a month. You'll know the streets. You'll know the men." It starts to feel like home. And you lie there afterward in the smoke-smelling dark, listening to the spring peepers, thinking about who said those words to whom, in another army, in another life, 5 months and 100 years ago. In the first week of June, the intelligence hardens into fact. The British are ferrying their heavy baggage across the Delaware. They are going out by land, the whole 15,000-man garrison, marching for New York across the Jerseys, a column that will stretch 12 miles of road in the June heat, and on the 17th the word runs through Valley Forge like the running fire itself. They are going. They are actually going. And on the 18th of June, 1778, the last British soldier marches out of Philadelphia, and the warm men's winter is over, and so is yours. The army leaves Valley Forge the next morning, 6 months to the day almost since it staggered in. The leaving is nothing like the arriving, and that is the entire story of the winter, told in 2 marches. In December, 11,000 men crawled up the Gulf Road in the snow, a third of them shoeless, trailing blood, dragging their own wagons, an army that European professionals had certified as finished. On the 19th of June, that army, and it is the same actual men, minus the 2,000 on the slope past the artillery park, comes down onto the road at 75 paces to the minute, in brigades that wheel and deploy like a drill book come to life. Shod, fed, angry, and moving fast, and it crosses the Schuylkill and goes after the British column through the Jersey heat, and 9 days later, at a crossroads town called Monmouth Courthouse, on the hottest day anyone can remember, it catches them. Monmouth is another story for another night, but you should know this much, because it is the last line of the Valley Forge ledger, the proof of the whole winter's arithmetic. At Monmouth, on the 28th of June, the Continental line stands in open field against the best regiments of the British Army, the Grenadiers, the Guards, the steel that this army used to run from, and it does not run. It wheels under fire. It deploys from column into line in minutes, the naked minute mastered. It holds its ground through 100-degree afternoon, volleying like a machine, and when the British steel comes on with the lowered bayonets and the cheer, the American line, for the first time in this whole long war, meets bayonet with bayonet, and it is the British who give way, and every man in that line, holding, sweating, thrusting, is standing in the frozen mud of the grand parade with a fat Prussian's hands on his shoulders. The battle ends a draw on the map and a thunderclap everywhere else. The army of Valley Forge fought the army of Philadelphia to a standstill in an open field, and after that day the British never again seek a general battle in the north. Not once, not in 5 more years of war, and the road that ends at Yorktown begins, as truly as anywhere, in the mud of a Pennsylvania drill field. In the winter everyone was supposed to die. You marched out with them that June morning. But before the column stepped off, in the grey first light, you did what half the army did one way or another, in its own last hour on the hill. You went and stood a moment in the doorway of the hut. It was already becoming what it is now, which is to say, the past. Cold fireplace, swept clay, the bunks bare poles, 12 men's winter gone out of it like heat out of a stone. Somebody, Ben probably, had left one green ribbon tied to the bunk post, and you left it there. You put your palm flat on the door frame, on the oak you felled and notched with your own split hands in a December snowstorm. Wood you carried on your shoulder when the horses were dying, and the wood was warm already with the June morning, and under your palm you could feel the axe marks, your axe marks, and you stood there for the space of 3 breaths, and then the drums began down the street, the step, the real step, 75 to the minute, and you turned and took your place in the rank, and you did not look back, and you have been looking back ever since. The huts did not last. You should know that too, because it is strange and somehow right. Within a few years, the farmers of the valley pulled them down for the timber and the nails. Nails were precious, and ploughed the streets under, and the hut city that was for one winter the third largest city in America vanished back into ordinary fields, and cattle grazed the grand parade, and the burial slope went green and anonymous, exactly as the wolves and the orders intended. And for a long lifetime, Valley Forge was just a name farmers used for a bend in the creek, where an old iron forge had burned in the war. And then slowly the country remembered. The men of that winter grew old, and their grandchildren began to ask, and the old men would go quiet in a particular way, and the country came to understand, generation by generation, what it had been given on that hillside, until the fields were bought and kept, and the lines of the huts were traced and raised again. And today, this very night, the hillsides between Mount Joy and Mount Misery are a great hushed green park, 3,500 acres of it, and the reconstructed huts stand in their rows with their doors open to the tourists and the school buses, and the deer, hundreds of deer, graze the grand parade in the evenings where the running fire ran, and the little stone house by the creek still stands, the actual house. You can put your own palm on the actual door frame, and people do every day, and go quiet in a particular way. Asa Merrill is not in the histories. You will not find him, because I gave him to you. One imagined man to carry 12,000 true ones, the way a single candle carries a fire. But everything he passed through was real and is documented. The bloody footprints and the fire cake, the no-meat crows in the dark, the boiled leather, the turnip divided 12 ways, the baron's borrowed profanity, the boys on the burial slope, the running fire of the 6th of May. Somewhere in the muster rolls of the 4th Connecticut are the names of the men he stands for, in fading iron gall ink, farm boys and rope makers' sons, and most of those names are attached to no story at all anymore, just the name, the town, the word present, written by a sergeant's cold hand in a hut on a hill in the worst winter of the war. Present. That was the whole heroism in the end. They were present. They stayed. And now the fire is burning down, and so are you, and that is as it should be. Let the winter go now. You lived it. You don't have to hold it. Let go of the picket line and the frozen creek. Let go of the wind with teeth. You're not on the hillside. You're warm, and that boy's watch ended 2.5 centuries ago, and it ended well. Feel where you actually are. The weight of the blanket, which is thicker than any blanket at Valley Forge. The softness under you, which no man in that hut city ever knew. The quiet of your room, with no wind working the roof shakes, no rattle in the breathing above you, no drums. You have eaten today. You're warm tonight. You're safe enough, fed enough, warm enough. That is more than an army of good men had, and they would be glad, genuinely glad, the way soldiers are glad of small mercies, to know that you have it. The sounds of the camp are fading now, or maybe you're just listening less. Somewhere far off, the last fires are burning down to red eyes in 1,000 mud chimneys. The sentries are changing on the outer line, quiet passwords in the dark. The Schuylkill is moving under its ice patient, going to the sea. 12 men are breathing in a smoky room, slower now, slower, packed warm against each other under thin blankets, and one by one their thoughts are going out like candles. The farm gates and the rope walks and the mothers in doorways, all of it softening, all of it letting go. Centuries will pass. The hut city will vanish into green fields and rise again as memory. The road the army bled on will be paved and lit and filled with machines no man on that hillside could dream. The river will be bridged and tamed. The fevers will be conquered. The muskets will go to museums and hang silent behind glass. But people will still live in the valley, still work there, still walk up Mount Joy in the evening light and turn round at the top, still lie down at the end of long days in winter with the wind outside and pull the blanket to their chins and feel that old animal gratitude, warm enough, fed enough, safe enough, that no century ever changes. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long watch, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took a tired soldier in a log hut on a Pennsylvania hillside 250 winters ago, with the fire down to embers and the watch passed safely to someone else. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. Your watch is over. Someone else is on the line tonight. You've earned this rest. Take it. And dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.